Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. Welcome to a very special bonus episode of Wake, the podcast that's all about the many angles, perspectives and opportunities that come from fulfilling a long-held bucket list item. Reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once. I'm your host, Toby Malone, joined once more by the man who's been with me every step of this journey, TJ Young. Hi, TJ.
Oh, hi, Toby. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excellent.
Yeah, today's going to be a great episode.
Absolutely, yes. So you had your car broken into last night, but this is going to be better than that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, I was like, it's close to Halloween. They decided to trick me instead of treat me. It's totally fine.
And they didn't take anything out of your car, so...
There's nothing to take.
And today is a very special episode of Wake. We have no reading plan for this week. Instead, we are welcoming a very talented guest to join us for a chat. Richard Harte is an Irish-Canadian actor who stars in what some have described to me as a competing Finnegans Wake podcast with Toronto's One Little Goat Theatre Company. Now, I want to say right off the top that there is no competition. These are two entirely different projects, and we're very supportive of each other's work. So welcome, Richard, to Wake.
Toby, TJ, delighted to be here. You guys are like galloping through. It's really like we're slow pokes compared to you with our work on our own podcast and the film series. It's
yes, well,
you'll have taken it. I mean, I suppose since you're never finished Finnegans Wake, because it's a circular novel, you just have to keep going. So you'll have lapped us a couple of times before.
There is a good chance. I believe that the plan for One Little Goat's production is to go for the next 4 or 5 years until the 90th anniversary.
I don't know, man. I'm that's like fingers crossed. We're through book 4 by on schedule. But holy crap, I look at the book 2 and 3 ahead and I see the chapters that are 4 hours long. And I'm like,
oh, yes.
Like we have plans, but we've been, our process is filling one chapter at a time. I get up and I read a chapter in front of an invited audience somewhere. And we do it a chapter at a time, but it's like at a certain stage, we're going to be running into complication with extra chapters that go for 2-3 hours and then let alone the chapter that has all of this stuff that happens in the margins of the book.
Night lessons. Lessons.
There is a lot ahead, but I'm very excited for you to have a chance to explore that. I mean, obviously you're not a newcomer to Joyce and to The Wake. I mean, have you read The Wake independent of this project?
Not in the slightest.
Oh.
No, I'll tell you, like, I've had a long association with the work of James Joyce through the Toronto Bloomsday Festival. That has been going in Toronto. We this coming year, we'll celebrate our 40th anniversary with the Toronto Bloomsday Festival. There's been a continuous celebration of the work of James Joyce. They call it Bloomsday. It happens every June 16th. And that fans around the world celebrate that day as Bloomsday. And there's been one in Toronto for, coming up 40 years. And I've been with them 25 years, I think I'll be with them. So I've had a long experience being with, working, in Joyce performance specifically. But not with the Wake. Like I'd lie and tell you, of course I've read it, but I hadn't. Huh. And the work that there've been some pieces from Finnegans Wake that have been lifted and used in our Bloomsday scripts, but only fragments because they're hard. Yeah. So mostly we're pulling from Ulysses because June 16th, the day that people celebrate Bloomsday, that is the day of the events of Ulysses, June 16th, 1904. It's also the date that James Joyce met or had his first date with Nora Barnacle, who became his wife and muse.
Mhm.
So that date has a lot of resonance, but really it celebrates Ulysses, and then his other work is included in there. So I'm familiar with The Dead and Dubliners and the Portrait of the Artist, and those works really come up and get play. Lots of sharply drawn characters and drama and stuff like that. But the Wake, occasionally we throw some in just to confuse the audience and the performers. But I had never read it. So,
Right.
And what can I say?
Yeah.
So
we hear it a lot. I mean, this was when TJ and I first came to this. We'd read all the rest of his, but not the Wake. And we sort of did this because we felt like this was the only way we were going to summit the works of Joyce, was to do it this way. But I'm surprised. I would have thought that as a Joyce lifer that you might have had a go. But yeah,
I think I would have cracked it open, and then been flummoxed. And I'll tell you why. Because I would have stared at it.
Yeah.
And I think the way that people are approaching this and want to have a way of working with it is by working with other people and by reading it out loud. And that was the start of us, because just like you, this started for me because two smart guys, Thomas Pontier and Jordy Kaufman. I think they're both professors at George Brown University, and started a pandemic project of reading Finnegans Wake together in a kind of Zoom thing and try and get to grips with it. And they didn't get too much headway before they pulled in Adam Seelig. Adam Seelig is a relative of Jordy Kaufman's and also a smart guy, and who has his theater company, One Little Goat Theater Company in Toronto, and with whom I've worked many times on his plays that he's directed. So he, knowing me and knowing my association with Joy, called me in after he had a go, and they were like, he was enjoying what he was hearing, but they didn't really make too much headway. So they pulled me in, knowing I was Irish, and then I had a crack at reading with them in their in their Zoom group, but it was the first time for me. But I'll tell you, reading it aloud, suddenly it was like I was speaking a language that I didn't realize I knew how to speak. That's how it kind of felt to me, like and I think there's been a lot of kind of stuff that's informed why, because of my work on Joyce text, obviously, and through my work with One Little Goat Theater Company, because you would describe Adam's theatrical bent as in the modern or postmodern or surreal or any of those adjectives that might describe that kind of modern work. So that, there was a connection there, and also because I'm Irish and I came with the right accent. So,
it makes a big difference.
Well, to me, it was like, there is so much hyper specificity about localism in the Wake. It's and through that, I think, is a universality. It kind of like you go really, really local, and then people start to recognize themselves in it, even though it might be so removed. It's just because you're drenched in where you are. People know that. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you can see it right in front of you, and then it blows wide open. And the Wake is deliriously expansive. Like, it goes up and down and back in time, and into space and into technology. There's all kinds of things going on. But the Irishness of it, the Dublinness of it, is what I could see, the idiom, the musical references, the rhythms, and that those things came very naturally. So when that happened, people really responded well, and then life took over, and people got busy, and the sort of that kind of thing fell away, and Adam and I were left going, well, what do we do? Why don't we do something? Okay, let's do something. And we didn't want to do because of how people responded, and the, people really like, were people, I get it. I don't understand it, but I get it. Like they really felt the energy. I think the first thing that I read was the Prank Queen in chapter 1. And it's a nice section, and it's probably, very, like, the rhythms of it are much more accessible than some of the chunkier stuff that happens, immediately before and after. There's very dense sections, but that one has a great flow, but I think it's kind of buried. So when I read it, I was like, oh, fairy tale, off we go. And and people really were like, I could hear them. And there was laughs, like surprised kind of, oh, like, I get it. But that was such a part of that experience, and that like everybody was really jazzed by being able to get kind of a flavor that we didn't hear. Well, I certainly didn't when I was personally reading it alone by myself. I didn't, my first tries, I couldn't get anything out of it, stuck in my own head. But as soon as I was reading it with people, the energy and the lift that it gave was just so apparent. And suddenly we were in this river. And so what we wanted to do was not go into a booth and record it like a audiobook.
Right.
We definitely wanted to do a live thing, but we also didn't want to do we also didn't want to just be like Zoom stuff or that kind of thing. We're theater people. We wanted people in the room, and then all kinds of things started to occur about, like, well, how does that work, and what, and how does that, like, affect how I read, and from there it's been a developing process of how to make an event happen, and like it informs how we read the text, and then deciding to film it and all this sort of stuff. So anyway,
you talking about reading it out loud and getting that energy back. Reading it has definitely illuminated a lot more of the text for me than if I was just reading it by myself. But one of the questions I have is, I think that Joyce plays so much with the text on the page, right? And I think that that's where a lot of the jokes are buried, in the way that he's messing with homophones and the manipulation of letters and stuff like that. How do those jokes that live mostly visual translate into you performing them? Well, or do you just say, hey, if you're going to read it, you're going to get something different from it?
Definitely, if you read it, you're going to get something different from it. But the plan from the get-go about doing a project was having it be a film, so that we would do the live staged reading, and that I have my interpretation and how I approach a line, and we work on that. We're looking at these conjunctions and these made up words and all this stuff, and I read them how I do, and we come to decisions about that. And we know there's all kinds of interpretations to be made that'll differ from that, for sure. But the plan was always to have the subtitles in the and the page numbers embedded into the films, so that those would be like, people could see what I'm saying might not necessarily line up with how they read it, or that something might reflect differently back at what I'm saying and change the shape of it somehow. So, yeah.
I the reason I love that is because I do think that this is one of those books that has to be experienced on both levels, both from an auditory sense and from a visual sense. And so providing that context as people interact with your work, I think is fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I approach this as an actor, so I'm working at it like trying to find a living spirit in it. And that I'm, I can't say I'm working towards a character exactly, because character is very slippery in this book. It's not something that it kind of, there are moments where things seem sharply defined, and then the edges immediately get corrupted or this is satirized or taking the piss, as the Irish would say, and then the shape changes, and then you're somebody else.
But I do appreciate the way that the rehearsal process that you've been able to go through has sort of afforded you the opportunity to honor those characters that we encounter in a way that we can't when we're doing a cold read. We come across a character and it's behind us before we have even realized what we've said. And so we do these cold reads, and we get halfway through something, and when we look back and we're like, oh, this was a whole conversation between 4 different people, and we didn't realize what that was. Whereas you're able to take, Kate Strong in the music room and really turn her into a character, for example.
Sorry, who's that now?
Well, when you did Kate Strong in the music room.
Oh, Kate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Kate. Yeah,
and that real personality that you're able to bring out. That was fantastic. Whereas we started with Kate, and we're like, I don't know what's going on.
We're running down the road and being like, oh, we passed something, It's
in chapter 3, there's a section they call the reporterage. It's a series of people like Vox Populi interviewed about the character of Earwicker and what they think about him, and there's about 24 of them, I think. And so when we're doing our initial reads, and we're kind of marking out like exactly, well, fuck me, I got to do 24 different voicings here. You just sort of putting that aside, and then you'll come back and then you really separate. And then, I think the one you saw, Toby, like right in the middle of a really intense, focused investigation into like the right down to the shape of the letters of the letter. Suddenly there's a card game that breaks out in the middle of it. And the 4 old men of the 4 corners of Ireland show up, and then, and, as we go, I come to expect the cameos. So like I'm kind of ready more and more as we go, and as we've gone through like this process. But still, my God, there's so many surprises. Like right at the end of chapter 5, a kind of mask gets ripped off, and you realize as the character has sort of come into view in a way about this sort of investigation, which is kind of like a pursuing the mystery of this letter. First, it's sort of solemnized, or there's a prayer that sort of invokes it at the beginning, and then as you get down into it, you're investigating its sacred nature, and then you're investigating the authorship, and then you're realizing that it's something else, and then by the end it's come from kind of an ancient place to right in the room next door. It's your fucking brother who you hate, who's been behind this the whole time. It sort of drags all of history and all this sort of Irish Book of Kells like thing into something very immediate, which is just the very wakey thing. But the end has this false ending, and then it keeps going as somebody who's like rankling under this discovery, and then it's a real present moment of drama. It's so, and I love how Joyce weaves that in. The reason I came to want to be in the Toronto Bloomsday Festival, as I came to Toronto in 2000. I think I first saw my first Bloomsday in 2001, and I think I saw, and it was in some basement, some church basement, like I can't even remember, but where. And there was just people with scripts in their hands, and no blocking people. Someone would say, "Okay, go ahead," and people would step forward. There were about 50 to 70 people watching this, and they read the Christmas dinner scene from Portrait of the Artist, and it's just this bunch of actors reading off, but it's still among my favorite memories of it, and the best acting I've ever seen. And this amazing scene where it's family, it's like the Christmas, it's an important dinner gone wrong. But it brings in all this politics and religion and classic Irish stuff, and it compacts it in this way, and has an artist observe and interpret it. Amazing. And so the potential of drama in Joyce is like, I'm always thrilled when we uncover something like that. And as an actor, it's like El Dorado, because I had no idea that there's so much of that in The Wake. And how would you know?
Mm-hmm.
You have to read it.
Well, and there's so much of everything. I mean, I can't quite come to grips with how overwhelming it must be for you in preparing to perform it, because there is so much of everything in there. Like, all things are in there, and all possibilities are endless, and you can get caught up in the meaning of a single line or a single paragraph, and then get bogged down and get lost. I mean, how do you choose what your track is at a specific time?
Excellent questions. Thankfully, I'm not alone. I'm with Adam Seelig, who is my director, and the two of us. And not only are we not alone, we got, like behind me here, I have the Tyndall Reader's Guide to Finnegans Wake, the annotations, a guide through Finnegans Wake by Epstein, and we have other resources, Dennis Rose online, Finwake, and the Chicken Guide to Finnegans Wake. This stuff, and our typical process now that we've kind of honed it a little bit is when we start a new chapter, we do a read, and then we mark out trouble spots and think of how everyone's not going to get this at all, and then we start breaking into the resources and doing that process of going, what the fuck does that mean, and getting through every single word and every line. It's a very persnickety little process, because there's things that I think that I might be aiming at, but they get diverted. All right. But it's fantastic, because it, like so many of these compounds, they're worlds in themselves, and it's just beautiful. So that's a real pleasure, sinking into that, into all this scholarship and teasing that apart, and then we'd go line by line, and then we start making notes on paragraphs. One of the great books on it is by William Tyndall, The Reader's Guide to Finnegans Wake, but he often speaks of digressions. And so he'll say, I hear another digression by Joyce, and that one always pissed me off, because it's like, it can't be a digression. It's got to be the next thing. It's got the rising action of stuff. And
right.
So there comes a point when we're in rehearsals that we're sort of naming paragraphs and finding how they link and why it's the next thing. And that's when I start to see the point of the chapter as a whole. Like that I think in chapter 2, we described it as off to the races. There's a point at which a race track and a kind of verbal race happens, as this rumor about what happened in the park with Earwicker and the 2 girls and the 3 guys starts to fly all around Dublin, and then fly out into the provinces and tar his name. And so that was off to the races became our understanding of that chapter. And then in chapter 3, it was how the poisonous cloud of all that bad word that was spread finely by Harte in his song, how that poisonous cloud gets dispersed all over Ireland and then starts to decay. And by the end of it, it's like it falls back down on him as raindrops. And then at that incredible end where he's, drains, dumps, that amazing ending. So it's like he's spat up, or, not him, but the word of it has been released as a poisonous cloud, and then eventually ends descending into those raindrops. So we have a kind of shape of the whole, or I can hold in my head that central idea, and then each paragraph leads me to there. I think as we approached 5, it was it's this paleographer, or there's been a few chapters, and this helps because of the nature of our staging, if you like, that we have a podium. It's actually a music stand, which is nice, with my text on it, but it kind of looks like a lecture, and there's someone discoursing about something about this, and eventually it's a letter, and eventually it's like teased out so specifically, and you're looking at paper spaces and a tea stain and just very minute things, but eventually it becomes extremely personal, and that from something that's been taken out of the muck of Irish history, as if it were the Book of Kells or the Ardagh Chalice, this ancient thing from the past, is actually in the room with you now, and it's something direct that your character has coalesced around and is annoyed about. So that's the flow of something that I have, that like our process sees something that is very spread out and diffuse, and then we kind of sharpen each part of it, looking very closely, and then that broadens out to shape the paragraphs, and then it broadens out to shape an arc for the whole chapter.
Yeah.
I'm super interested in how your relationship with the audience in these readings has changed the way that you deliver these readings. I imagine that from you doing 6, live readings now, you doing the first one was vastly different than the last one. Or at least, or was it? Was there anything that you learned after those first couple times of having people in front of you that you're like, these are the adjustments I need to make in my approach?
I tell you what, I'm an actor, so I always consider whatever I'm saying as being relational to an audience.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm always I mean to say this slightly tongue in cheek, but I always think that the idea, our kind of central thesis for our approach, is that it's meant to be this way. There's meant to be an audience. In fact, the audience is part of the dream that he is defending. I don't know, even he is appropriate, but whatever the entity, the dreamer, the central thing, the here comes everybody, is defending himself and his life, and this is in the first few chapters as we've gone so far, and then some stuff starts to fracture, but that there's always an audience, that there's a we. It comes up so much. In the first chapter, it comes up when I think certainly as the actual wake portion of the chapter happens, after he says, "Anna Mukhandul, did you drink me darnail?" Which is cribbed from the Finnegans Wake song, "Thunder and Jesus, did you think I was dead?" And then somebody takes over, another voice, a mourner, someone attending the wake takes over and says, rest yourself now, don't, take it easy, sure, you're dead, you're fine, we're great, aren't we, everyone? This is a lovely event. You rest, sir. You take easy with your knees now and just settle yourself. And we'll take care of it. And that brings it right out to everybody who's there, because their mourners are there. So the audience becomes the mourners at that point. There's other points in the very beginning of chapter 2. We are going to talk about his how he was named, and then we'll go through all that sort of stuff. But we're together in that. So I always imagined that the audience's central character and the dreamer is speaking to somebody.
Mhm.
Always, I think. Like even it's great interplay between public and private. Like all the best dramatists play with that public-private thing.
Oh, for sure.
And like, in chapter 6, when they go through the quiz, all these various cameos appear of all these characters, which, is kind of going through Sean, if you like, as he becomes caped, or he becomes the 4 men, the 12 bar attendants, the girls, and then Issy. But Issy's audience is kind of herself.
Mm.
She's got a mirror, but she's also it's always relational. There's always people in there with you. You're always interviewing yourself. Well, I am. Yeah, you've always tuned these conversations you've had with yourself. You've always said these things before, and in the mirror, and justifying, ruminating, and that's amazing thing. Like the Wake constantly, like fractals, these patterns emerge, and they keep blossoming out, and they're teased over, and they just, like a dream, they get reflected and refracted, and witnessed. And so, yeah, your question being that, how does it change now? Like, we've had smaller audiences, we've had bigger audiences, and I guess practically speaking, just doing the first one and not having any clue. People, what are they going to do? Are they just going to stand there like, what the fuck? I'll tell you what, though. Adam's like he's such a, like, you need an Adam Selig in your life, guys. He's a mensch. He watches and observes and laughs and is very humane, and it, like, so I'm always with somebody doing it, and so I've always trusted, because he trusts the process that we're doing, that like it sits well with people, and it has so far. It, like, I want to honor your question. It has changed, certainly. I don't know. I'm wrapped up in the doing of it, I guess.
No, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And the reason I asked the question is because normally theater is this repetitive process where your relationship with the audience, you kind of get to hone over time, you know, and you doing these like sort of one-offs and then being of different audiences and different locations and different circumstances, it changes the relationship. But it sounds like you have one hell of a partner in there to provide you that feedback that you would need to prepare to step into those situations.
Yeah, exactly right. A hell of a partner, and it wouldn't happen without Adam, because he's the guy who fucking gets it all together. I'm in the dream.
But then you're also performing for an audience which is generally very enthusiastic and supportive, but also completely baffled.
Yeah,
which is a really interesting sort of dichotomy, because they really want to love it. They're enthusiastic, but then for many it's tough to land.
I mean, I really feel that he's a good writer. Is Joyce, and I really appreciate how we come across what I call very crunchy parts of the text. Crunchy, I know from like, the fuck am I going to get this across? I mean, and eventually I'm in it, and I know why I'm doing it. I know what my thought is. I know the thread, the line between things, and I know that I understand it, and I understand why it's like this. Well, there's a lot of this is like this, you know, in
Mhm.
my in my in my in my I don't know, trying to capture it. But I also know that for even all those crunchy parts, he always leavens it, shortly thereafter with a little sweet. Like I think of, uh, like the prank queen thing comes after a very crunchy section or that there's this little bit in the I want to say third chapter that we call the strawberry frolic, where suddenly you're in like a Maurice de Chevalier, or kind of this hijinks with you and two girls, kind of little black and white film, sort of like Benny Hill, like
Yeah.
you can almost hear the theme song, and it's very clear that that's what that is, and suddenly the language loosens up and is much more relatable and understandable. It feels like that's the rhythm that he's providing, those who hear it with a little release, that it gets contracted, and there's pungency, and there's like, and I like I like attacking it, the stuff that's crunchy, and eventually determining, like getting an intention that propels me through it, the why, and then getting to this, and then, but I know that the audience is going to go, what? But then it leavens and softens and it flows, and it's this river, and and sometimes the river takes you under, and you're struggling, and then sometimes you're bobbing along, and that's the release, and just the fucking incredible writing that allows an audience in at various places. And
Yeah, that's the thing that I have found, is that we will be reading, and half the time the words are coming out of my mouth and I'm like, I have no idea. And then it feels like it breaks open to a section where I'm like, this is poetry on the page in a way. And I was like, I would have this tattooed on my body because it's so gorgeous,
yeah.
And I infinitely commend you for being like, and I have to be the one to decipher this, to get it across, because man, I always say that the words feel really good coming out of Toby's mouth. I feel like he's getting the rhythm, and I'm like, I am just walking down the road hitting every pothole and saying, like, okay, at least we're walking together,
Well, that's beautiful. Like, as people enjoy this the way they do, and yeah, for me,
Well,
the
and
doing of it is that's the best part.
it is, and I feel as though the doing of it is happening in all sorts of different ways. I mean, there's all these, like you said, there's these reading groups that people get together on Zoom, who they get together and they read a page a week, or they'll analyze and they'll go through, or there'll be us who are ripping through, and we've done 3/4 of the book in 4 months. And then yours is going to take years, but then I feel as though the reward of yours is that we're going to have that forever, that we're going to have that film version that we can then look back on and have that. And so I think it's really interesting, because when I pitched this idea to TJ, it was all came down to, I want to finish the works of Joyce, but I can't quite bring myself to read it silently to myself. I think I need to read it aloud. I need to be kept accountable. So the only way to do that is to have a podcast. And then I looked around to see if there was anything out there in the world, and there was one or two Finnegans Wake things. But because Finnegans Wake is not in the public domain in the US, there isn't really very much out there. But it is in public domain here. So I looked, and the only other thing that I saw was One Little Goat. It was sort of a serendipity that there was these two projects running at the same time, and then I looked and was like, "Oh, that's Richard." Okay, and Richard, and we worked together many years ago, back when I was a dramaturg.
Midsummer Night's Dream.
That's right, a dramaturg.
Another
production.
dream.
That's right. So we did, and you played Demetrius, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. In a very successful production that we did in Hyde Park here in Toronto.
Yeah, that was a magical Yeah,
That was a
and
fun one.
we got up 2 summers in a row there.
Yeah,
In
that's
Hyde
it.
Park.
Yeah,
Oh, I
and
still remember that. That was
that
beautiful.
was a fun one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we got to work on that. And so seeing you in the video and going, oh, look, it's Richard. And of course he's doing it. But then I thought, no, these are different things. And seeing, and then listening to the podcast as it's been coming out, I listen to yours every 2 weeks when it comes out, and had the opportunity last week to actually come for a live recording. And so I was in the room. This is, you mentioned earlier that about 1.5, as I was in the room for 1.5 and getting a chance to hear it performed was a real treat, because I was listening to you perform a chapter that I had read myself 2
Right.
months earlier. And I remembered nearly nothing from having read it. Like I'd not only read it, but I'd produced the podcast, and then I'd listened to the podcast when it came out, and there was discussion about it. It was an episode where our friend Neil Wexler was appeared with us. I didn't remember anything. But the thing is, listening to you perform it, I pulled so many new things from that chapter than I had when I read it, and it was so rewarding to think that this text is going to illuminate different things at different times, and it's infinitely rereadable. And you're always going to find, like, the whole section about Biddy the hen on the midden mound,
Yeah.
which I completely missed when we did the reading, because we were reading dry.
Yeah.
It came vividly out when I saw your performance, and so that was really delightful, getting a chance to sort of to see these things illuminated. And you have moments when you sit there and you go, I'm completely baffled. I have no idea what's happened for the last 15 minutes. And then you have moments when it's like the clouds part and the sun comes out, and you say, oh, I hear it. And I think a lot of that's to do with the performance. So it was a real
cheers.
So,
Well, it was special to be there.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was real kismet. There was real
that room, yeah, it's a very special room.
Yeah, and because it was an exploration of ancient text, and the connection with the Book of Kells, and also the connection with people examining ancient texts.
Mm-hmm.
There's with that farm fowls fail. I can't remember the line now. God, but there's a section in there where it gets so specific, and it's drawn specifically from a text by this man named Sullivan, who wrote an appraisal of the Book of Kells. I think it was in the 1860s, and that book is well known in Ireland and well known to Joyce, and he was a real champion of the Book of Kells and spoke so glowingly and with such abundance over the little details and the tiniest things. And that's exactly what's followed along in that particular paragraph, the long paragraph of, I think it's the second last part we would have filmed, Toby. And and it's just adoring look at these little glorioles and these little details that they're just teased over, and that's where the line an ideal reader with an ideal insomnia, which is a fairly well-known line from that part, comes in, and so to be in that room where ancient texts and incunabula and all these amazing first editions of of first folio, or there was even not the first edition of the Book of Kells, of course. There's only one of those, but other great works from literature. And just are lovingly embraced.
And just for the listeners, like the episode for Chapter 5 was recorded at the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library in Toronto, at the University of Toronto, which is an incredible, amazing room, soaring ceilings with bookshelves all the way up, hundreds of feet in the air, and being able to record in that room, but then also to have a curated exhibition placed around the room between the readings. So we listen to the sections and then give an excellent context by the director to say, now if you look at table 2, this is where all the references to table 2 are going to be. And so having, and having things like curios like first editions of work in progress, or the examination book, or
the examination book, and also the McLuhan material as well. The Fisher Library hosts the McLuhan archives, and Marshall McLuhan was a devotee of Finnegans Wake, wrote extensively about it in published books, and also was known to buy a copy and fill the margins with his own notes, and then he'd put that aside, buy another copy, and fill that one with notes. So we had at least one of those copies of McLuhan's own copies of Finnegans Wake on display. And in fact, his grandson was there.
That's right,
for the recording. So that was it was very cool.
Yeah, and so when we came into the Fisher, John Shoemaker was there, the one of the Rare Books librarians, who was very anxious, for good reason. There was rare books in the room, and everyone had to put their bags away, and not allowed to bring anything inside because of the rare books that were there. But you'd also done previous recordings at Irish pubs. So, which has got to be a very different kind of experience when you recorded at Noonan's compared to the Fisher. I mean, how did that?
The different vibe. Okay, more loose.
I imagine the Guinness was flowing.
Pints and having pints around. And indeed, like the movie has me like I go through a pint during that reading, which is fitting. Very different. Like it's earthier, and the ceiling is down, and the voice is channeled out differently. It's you're right. It's fucking different.
Yeah, and then you had some recordings in private houses.
Adam has hosted us a couple of times in his house, and then, as I said, we went to Dublin and performed this is in Rush, County Dublin, which gets a couple of mentions. The little seaside village of Rush, townland of twined lights, sweet Rush is a line that's in the first chapter of Finnegans Wake. So it was that was very special to be there, and that a lot of my early memories of that room involved stuff that I really draw upon as specifically for this project. My uncles were big fans of the Goon Show. The Goon Show was a radio comedy from the BBC back in the 1950s, and it was where Peter Sellers got his start. And it was a very madcap, anarchic forerunner of a lot of the, classic British comedy that came after, like Monty Python and 9 O'Clock News and all these kinds of shows. And so I listened to those records, and I went, like, the very first thought I had of, like, well, how do I do this? What was, Goon Show was very much an idea of like springing into other voices, and there were 3 performers in the Goon Show, and they had, I don't know, 100 characters an episode, and they're all just flying through them. So that was a real, like, that's something to think about as I do that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we talk often about the influence of the absurdists and Beckett and all those guys, obviously on Joyce, as he was writing. But it's really interesting to think about taking influence from performing style of something like the Goon Show or the Pythons, things like that, which fits so well, fits so clearly, and really allows you to get a toehold within that world, and that's really very interesting.
Yeah, well, we've talked about how character is very slippery in Finnegans Wake. That these sort of things kind of can take a sharp turn, and then sometimes they can slowly come on. I don't say there's a soft maskness to it, but then sometimes it's very vivid. But I didn't want to, like I always wanted to like I know it's like people might go, well, I have my interpretation, and that's not what I was like. My one might jibe with some people, and then others might think, oh, that's not how I think about this at all. Fine, but I definitely didn't want to leave it on. I didn't want to leave that up. I didn't want to leave that. Like I've heard readings of Finnegans Wake that are very clear and but neutral, I'd say,
Right.
that are well spoken, and they allow for a lot of room for interpretation because they're being as neutral as possible. And I didn't want to do that. I was going to have somebody in the room going through something. I'm going to be the dreamer, and you're my dream audience, and I'm going through what I'm going through in the moment now, and I am overwhelmed by the river of history and time and space and all the stuff that flows through Finnegans Wake. But it's me bobbing along or being dragged under sometimes as we go. So that touchstone like the Goon Show was a way of sort of, I have to be as full as I can. I have to be as, to disappear into somebody else as I can. And I was finding like, that's what that's what I was kind of responding. Like, I feel like that's what it was, the text was asking me to do. And that when I was reading it out loud, or it's like, I felt uncomfortable enough reading it out loud that I might as well go for it. You know what I mean? Like I don't, I have a slightly uncomfortable relationship with performance as an actor. I kind of hate it, but I love it too. Like, it's just the fucking thing, you have to, here we go. It's the work. So so having something that's like so full on and gung ho. I watched a lot of, in preparation for the first chapter. I was looking at all these old movies and big performances. I was looking at, everything from Lon Chaney to Peter Sellers, and also video clips of farmers from Galway and things like, just really in the, and also the people from Chapelizod and the very specific place. And one thing that we did that really rocked our world, we took the first film, it was all done. We took the first film to the Bloomsday Film Festival at the James Joyce Centre in Dublin, where they screened it for us, and we were part of that festival, which was very nice. And they're lovely people there at the center. So it was very nice to connect. This is the thing. You meet all these Joyce people as you're doing this stuff, like you guys, and this is, it's not a big community, and you're starting to meet people that do things and connect with them, and everybody's so interested and keen on doing stuff, and really happy to work on things. It's just fantastic. But the best thing we did was walk through Phoenix Park and go to the Mullingar Inn, and then you start to realize like the cod history, like, say, of Kate in the Museum. It's like this history of Europe that she spins out of the air. Well, there's a strong case to be made. It's because she, as the charwoman of the Mullingar Inn, was, passes by the Nelson's monument in Phoenix Park, which has on it the friezes of all his battles in Europe and the language of it. And that has just been corrupted in her mind into this God. She's like, oh, sure, this happened and this happened and this happened. Oh, God, those fellas and them and them. And it's just her looking up at this thing, this concrete monolith, this giant dick in the middle of Phoenix Park, just sort of reading this stuff off. And as you go through Phoenix Park and you go like the world of it, the world of Finnegans Wake is just rising, and like you walk past the magazine wall from which Humpty Dumpty had its big fall, like that's there. It's like 100 feet away from the and it just contracts this entire dream landscape, which is vast, and there are giants and there's these spaces and things, but it's all this tiny little area, like the Anna Liffey Bridge is not very far away from there. The chapel, is it? The chapel to Isolde is there. Like that rocked our world, because we were just like, it's just a word. It's the flesh made word made flesh. It's transliteration. Like the language of it's a physical thing that's moved back into the voice. Like all these places that are just named, and I don't know, like what to say. They're made myth, and then they're physicalized as you say them out loud again. Amazing thing.
Yeah, it's amazing to sort of be in that place where which has inspired it, which can grow in our. I remember years ago I was in Scotland and went to Burnham Wood, and there's only one tree left that was there from when maybe it's from Shakespeare. It's called the Burnham Oak, and you can sort of sit inside of it. It's a big old tree.
Right.
But then when you're in Burnham Wood, you look around at the terrain, which is all up and down and like just about impossible terrain to get through, and you think, and it's it's a very eerie place to be, very spooky, and you think, man, if this wood just started walking, moving, like you can really understand the tone of the end of that play. But being, whereas when we see it, on most stages, it's a couple of guys with twigs above their heads.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the reality of it, of actually being in the space, really sets it off and brings it to life. And it's such a interesting perspective. I'm so glad that you got, when you got to Dublin, and I'm so curious as well, because we spend a lot of time on this apologizing for the quality of our reading, because we make a lot of mistakes, and that's fine. But we always invoke the dreaded purists, the people who will string us up because of our terrible. But we haven't met any yet. We keep expecting someone to throw rocks at us because we're not doing it right. But all we're getting is positivity and
I must
enthusiasm that we're just even doing it. I mean, what was the reaction that you found to?
People have been exactly as, especially, we've been in touch with some great folks who are, working away at various kinds of projects, like Carol Wade, who has this amazing painting cycle. She's creating images from the wake, and we've worked on a project with her, and with Des Gunning in Dublin, who's just an amazing resource and personality, and connected to Joyce Scholarship and the Joyce Center, and Dorina Gallagher has been she's the director of the James Joyce Center. They're very, like, everybody loves that we're doing it, and it's also been the Irish government's, really happy that people are especially, like me, an expat, or people are just spreading Irish culture like this. They're very happy about that, obviously. But yeah, the actual Finnegans Wake folks, that's been my experience also. Like, everybody's very happy. Like we reach out. Adam's really quick to ask the scholars, like, what the hell, are we on the right track here?
Right.
And everybody's very keen on supporting and joining. And I think that's the same thing with like you brought up the notion that we'd be in competing podcasts, which I think the wake floats all boats, really. Like I think I've talked to other people like a guy who was involved in a podcast in the States came up, or at least a Zoom, like a reading group. He got up to Toronto last Monday to come see the film, and we'll we'll make plans to go down there. And yeah, everybody really, it's a very supportive community. It's
amazing.
Delightful to feel that and to see the enthusiasm for something that I thought was so obscure. People are just, and some smart cookies that really like it.
Well, and the thing that I love is that, I mean, my previous career, I was a Shakespearean, and Shakespeare studies are full of gatekeepers, are full of people who are ready to tell you you're doing it wrong, or you don't understand it. Or, I mean, so it's such a, there's always a collection of people who ruin it for everyone else, who feel as though they own him, and if you don't do it perfectly, then you shouldn't do it. But I haven't met anyone like that in the Joyce community yet. Everyone is just very glad you're here, and that's kind of astonishing to me. That it may be a small community, but it's at the moment uniformly supportive, regardless of whether or not it's perfect or if it's if we're bumbling through like we are. The fact that we're doing it at all is seen as a lovely contribution to the conversation, which I love.
And when we do our analysis, it is Toby saying, I see all these things, and I'm like, I see the dirty joke. That's filthy, And if anything, I thought that people would come at us and say, he's not seeing the beauty for what it is. And I'm like, he's kind of filthy. And let's lean into that.
Oh yeah, that's the TJ. I'm with you. I feel like that's the first port of call. Like, and I think that's a reasonable foundation. Interpretation of Joyce is the dirty one first.
Yeah.
He had a mind, but how do you guys know each other?
Actually, through theater.
Okay.
Yeah, we both used to. I still am involved with the Kennedy Center American College Theater Festival. I met Toby there, and it's funny. We had one conversation, and he was like, "I'm thinking about writing this play," and I was like, "Okay," and I was like, "I write plays," and he's like, "Okay." And he was like, "Send me some of your plays sometime." But before I did, I sent him my favorite musical, Passing Strange, to be like, are we even on the same wavelength about story and structure and poetic text and things like that? And from then, it's been 7 years or so. Yeah,
I think I've dramaturged about 4 or 5 of TJ's plays now.
Oh, amazing! That's fantastic.
And including the adaptation of the Three Musketeers, which is being performed everywhere now. It's huge.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And then TJ dramaturgs my plays, and so and so just buddies.
Smart guys. Fantastic.
It's
fantastic.
Good. We have kept you a long time, so I don't want to keep you too. But I do want to ask you one question. I'm going to repeat to you the question that I asked you, that fear flitted across your face when I said it to you in person the other day. But I ask you again for the benefit of the podcast: is what are you going to do with night lessons?
Yeah, a reasonable flutter of fear, I say. Yeah, we don't know yet. We've tossed around animation and different voices. I think what I really know is I really trust our process and teasing out how I actually think, how we both, Adam and I, how we think about what the chapter is, broadly speaking. And we don't know until we get there. So I think it's going to be complicated because it feels like we would have to line up production elements well in advance of an approach to a chapter like that, because of how things get together. But I would think we would still do our "what the hell does this all mean" part. Right. Like that's like the fun. We love, every chapter has been a challenge to get there, to get to that place where there's a line. No, that's that leads to this. That's connected to how that works. And every time it happens like that, and there's a big reveal. There's something amazing that happens every chapter, like clockwork. And Adam and I are just like, that's incredible. That's how it's meant to be. It's our interpretation. Well, I understand that, but we're really into it. So
good.
We're fighting the corner of our interpretation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we get there. So night lessons, it's in front of us. Yeah. And so it's terrifying, and because of the, just the flow of the thing on the page it's complicated.
Yeah.
However,
yeah.
we'll go through a process and be absolutely certain that you're like, oh, it's this. That's what it means. So these guys have to be this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know it at all yet. Don't know. We've read it, but we don't know.
That was our most theatricalized, if we could say that. The 3 episodes that we did for Night Lessons are probably our most theatricalized, and we actively. Well, I don't
listen now and crib.
Well, I don't. Well, Toby does a little bit of research on the front end, but actively we go in unprepared, right? As unprepared as possible.
Yeah, all those books you mentioned before, we haven't read those books.
Yeah. Night Lessons is one where before we even tackled it, we had to sit down and say, there has to be some level of preparation and interpretation for us to be able to separate this out.
Right.
To again, make sense of it within this format.
Yeah. How did you guys decide did you read left to right and then the footnotes? Is it like, did you do the voice, like the surround? Like, how did you?
We had 3 people, and one person read the center column, one person read the marginalia, and one person read the footnotes. One person read left column, one person read right column, and the center column person also did their footnotes. That's right.
Okay.
It was a beast, and we did all 3 episodes in one sitting, and it was about 4.5 hours.
Yeah, you see, I can't, I want to be able to do, to have the energy level of the performance level that gets me to where I want to go. I'm gassed by if we're doing 90 minutes, that's probably a 6-hour shoot, right? So I'm done.
Yeah, that's super
have
fair.
A 4-hour, I'd be.
Yeah, for us, even we had some technical difficulties within the last 45 minutes, and it almost broke me. I was almost like, Toby, I'm out. I can't do this again.
Yeah, it was.
The struggle is real.
I think book two, whichever way you slice it, is a challenge. Book 1 and book 3. We're in book 3 now, and we're thoroughly enjoying ourselves again.
Okay, light at the end of the tunnel. Then, a preview. We have still 2 chapters in book 1 to go, and marked out. There's complication because we likely do chapter 8, washerwomen with an actress rather than me. And then, but it's a beautiful, amazing, and inviting chapter.
Yeah,
maybe the greatest pieces. And then chapter 7 is about as direct and angry polemic as there is in the book. So that like it does. I don't fear those ones.
Yeah.
So, but book 2, well, we'll climb that mountain, sure.
You're ready for some very great, nasty things in book 3, and I
we're thoroughly enjoying ourselves again.
Fabulous.
So, not that book 2 was unpleasant, but it was a challenge, but
crunchy,
yes,
indeed.
Very crunchy.
That's it. Well, it's been fantastic to talk to you. It's always so fun to talk the Wake, and I think people are going to be delighted to hear us all intersecting like this, because I certainly, as I say, I don't feel any kind of competition. I feel as though we're doing different things, and your interpretation of the Wake is so important. It really opens it up. In hearing it in the accent, I find myself drifting into the Irish accent every now and then because the language requires it. But and we've had readers we've had Americans, Canadians, Australians, English women, Scots reading. All these people reading on our podcast, and the accents really bring something to it. So
that's marvelous. Yeah,
it is wonderful. And
as I fight my Southern accent the whole entire time, I'm just trying. I was like, don't sound like a Texan when you read.
Plus one Texan.
There's a great Texan that comes up in Ulysses. Actually, in the hardest section of Ulysses, there's a Bible thumping preacher
That feels
a
real.
revivalist that comes up as a voice in the very end of the Oxen of the Sun episode. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So they're not alien accents that for
Very true.
days. Yeah. Well, there's my Amazon guy. So
Well, that's
Sorry about that.
it's so good to have you, Richard. And we'll make sure we direct everyone towards all of the videos and podcasts and episodes and things like that for One Little Goat Theatre Company. And if you're interested in getting hold of that information, check out onelittlegoat.org. And all the information is there, including upcoming recordings and releases. But that is all the time we have this week for Wake. So we'll return next week for a new chapter and a startlingly diminishing catalogue of remaining pages. I've been Toby Malone, joined as ever by TJ Young. It has been such a pleasure to have Richard Harte here to join us.
Thank you indeed
Richard.
so much for having me.
It's a real pleasure. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week, crossover fans. This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Perso Riley, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.